Hi, I'm Dr. Jessica Aviva, and I am based in the United States, Pennsylvania. I am a researcher, community change practitioner, and writer. One of the areas of my focus is feminist leadership. Many times, feminist leadership is specifically focused on women and the advancement of women, which can result in competition and women causing harm to each other unintentionally. And my focus is on what I call a gender inclusive, intersectional, integrative feminist leadership. And what that means is that I believe that a leadership that is feminist needs to embrace and bring together the gifts of people of all genders. And also, in addition to just focusing on people, I feel that feminist leadership provides the opportunity to think of the non-human world as well and how we relate to ecology and how we relate to animals and plants. And I think that's all a part of who we are because we're all interconnected. And I feel that leadership so much is just focused on people, but really we're living within and with those systems. So the way I think about leadership embraces that as well. So feminist leadership to me is multidimensional, and there's so many ways to think about it. And if you would ask 10 different people who say they're interested in feminist leadership, you would probably get 10 different definitions. And I think that's okay because feminist leadership provides that opportunity for some diversity and some conversation so that we can all learn from each other. And I feel like coming into it with that curiosity and openness helps us to all be better people and to engage more deeply with each other. So that's part of how I think about feminist leadership, not in one particular way, but in a way that integrates multiple perspectives and creates space for people who have different ideas to come together. If those ideas aren't harmful in any way, because that I think kind of fits outside the box of how I think about feminist leadership. And so some of the things that are really important to feminist leadership to me are practices of care, interconnectedness, and that involves the human and non-human world. Um, and that curiosity and learning, I think, are really important. So it does include focusing on women and the way that women do things and women's lived experience and, making sure that women are fully included. But it kind of goes beyond that as well because it's also, making sure that everyone has access to those opportunities. I feel that, so often in our work, when we're focused on one thing, we sort of unintentionally exclude other groups or other people or other things that are really important. And I feel that I want, part of like what like to do is to sort of figure out ways to weave it all together. Um, so that's sort of how I think about feminist leadership.
That's really helpful. I would have said all everything you're bringing into feminist leadership is relevant for any type of leadership. The diversity and the natural surroundings and other life forms. Now, um, so is there any need to distinguish between feminist and leadership in general?
I do think so. I think that as you mentioned, all leaders, whether or not they identify as feminist, can learn from feminist leadership, and as well as people who identify specifically as feminist leadership can learn from other practices of leadership. So I recently wrote a book called The Joy of Feminist Leadership, and one of the things I did in there was to look at different styles of leadership, such as, or like different thought thought schools of leadership. So like liberatory leadership, transformative leadership, anti-authoritarian leadership, like looking at different models of leadership and kind of like comparing and contrasting them to feminist leadership because there are differences, but I do think there's some common threads as well. But to me, the feminist leadership is distinguished for a couple of reasons. I haven't always identified as a feminist leadership. I've had all these ideas and I didn't quite know what to call it. And then I kind of felt that was the best thing to call it, which I started doing, maybe in my 40s. And so I think it's because the way I think about leadership is most strongly influenced by two things. And one is just my experiences I've had as a woman and how that has affected the way that I think and feel and interact in the world. And then also because a lot of my ideas about leadership come from feminist theory. So they come from ideas about patriarchy and about how sort of how there are sort of these practices and systems that can cause harm. So I think that because it's been influenced by feminist philosophy and because of my lived experience as a woman, that's why I identify as a feminist leadership. And so it does become something that's very specific. And then in addition to that, in addition to it sort of being like a school or a practice of leadership, I feel like it's very individualized because the way I think about it is based on my work. I work with community-based charitable organizations for the most part. I've worked a little in academia and government, but mostly, with communities. So I think the way I engage in leadership is probably very different based on, the type of work I've done and the type of organizations I've worked and the type of, projects and goals I've worked towards. So I think that feminist leadership creates that diversity, but it is a particular approach, even if it's not, sort of the way that I'm thinking about it, because it is rooted in women's lived experiences and what we can learn from that, looking through history and looking at where we are now, as well as specific
Jessica,
practices. Yes.
just give us a bit of the lived experience that some of the lived experience that is strongly that influences your approach.
Hmm. Yeah, so it's interesting. So recently I started a podcast. It just started today, and it is about sort of the horrors. It's a comedy, but it's a dark comedy. It's about the horrors of working in the nonprofit sector, and I think some of those things will be similar in other types of sectors. So, for example, today's episode is called Attractive, and it's about how women are valued based, not always, but like often women's value in the workplace is tied to our physical appearance or the way that we present ourselves to the world, and much more so than men. And that's a thing that can affect the way that we show up or don't show up. It can affect the way we engage or don't engage. And it can change the way we think about ourselves too. If we have to do a lot of work well, I have to sort of work past that. So this first episode is called Attractive. And it's sort of based on an experience of, someone being told that they'll be good at their job because they're, as a fundraiser, who's sort of the front-facing person of an organization raising money because they're attractive and not seeing the value in their work because they're strategic, because they're smart, because they're a kind person, because they work hard. It's none of that is brought into it, but there's this comment that this person is attractive. And I've experienced that myself in both ways, that I'm attractive or not attractive, because that's very subjective. And I've also observed this happening to other women, to other colleagues, and even in meetings, hearing male colleagues talking about candidates for jobs or talking about, other women they work with in ways, and sometimes the language is a little bit coded, so it's not as explicit, but still you can tell they're saying, basing on this woman's appearance as a qualification for their job. So that's one example of an experience as a woman that has influenced the way I think about leadership because part of what I want to do is to disrupt that and to make sure that people are valued for their humanity, for valued for what they contribute, and to just create space for that.
Fascinating. I'm wondering, yes, I love the breadth of your approach. That appeals greatly to me. And like I say, there's ideas in there that will be helpful to anyone from any aspect. Would you mind, because I'm not a scholar of leadership at all, you mentioned three different categories that you looked at in your book. I didn't catch the first word, but there was authoritarian
Mm.
and one other. Could you just go briefly through how you define those different categories?
Oh, sure. So, there were in the book, there were several. There were maybe eight or nine altogether, so I won't go into all of them. But some of the comparing and contrasting I did to other styles of leadership were so one was liberatory leadership, and this is a concept that comes
Liberatory. What was
liberatory.
the word?
I'm
L-
sorry.
Just say the word again. I haven't quite caught it.
Oh, liberatory.
Oh
So
yeah.
yeah, yeah. So this is a leadership that works towards the collective liberation of all people. And it's based on a scholar named Barbara Love. Her name was Barbara too. And so this is a practice very much aligned with how I conceptualize feminist leadership because that's definitely a part. I think feminist leadership is also working towards that collective liberation, that all people have equitable opportunities, that all people are able to flourish. That's what we're working towards in harmony with the environment. And but it's a little bit different because then, feminist leadership does have that specific angle of, of the women's lived experience and of the, sort of the history of the feminist philosophy. Um, Another style I mentioned is transformative leadership. And that comes from a political scholar named James McGregor Burns. And this is one that a lot of people have heard of, sort of comparing transactional versus transformational leadership, where transactional leadership is just sort of where we, do an exchange with somebody or work, kind of interact with somebody in order to achieve our goals. Whereas a transformational leadership, a style is, resulting in some type of real change that really matters more broadly than just the benefit to one person or organization. So I think that also is very much in line with feminist leadership because feminist leadership also um, is working towards that transformation, creating changes that are positive and that facilitate more compassion and care and empathy in the world. So that was another I mentioned. And then I also mentioned anti-authoritarian leadership. So this is, or decentralized leadership. So this is a style of leadership where organizations are more flat. Or even call themselves leaderless because there isn't one particular leader, but leadership is shared across multiple people. Um, so that is something that also very much aligns with the practice, in my view, of feminist leadership because power is something that is, generated and shared, um, through the practice of feminist leadership, so that all people have the opportunity to hear their, to participate fully and to influence the changes that are made.
Really, really, really helpful. All three of those, I can see how crucially they important they are at this point in time. I'll tell you, can I tell you a little bit about my lived experience
I would love to
and
hear.
what I'm learning at the moment from you and how I might try and employ it. So I've spent most of my life sort of watching humanity, thinking this is pretty crazy what we're doing. I don't like the look of it at all. I decided as a teenager I didn't want children, partly because I don't have that type of I'm an abstract thinker more than a practical person. So I'm not good at cooking or all the usual things that women are actually usually very good at. I'm not particularly good at. So I studied maths and physics at university, and I'm very comfortable with scientific modeling and scientific theory. And so that's how I tend to analyze what's going on in the world. And clearly, that is not a common way of looking at things. I find that men are much more inclined to think in that way than women. So um, I'm very fond of both genders. I have very close friends on both sides, and I had a very enjoyable marriage. I'm a widow now, but I learned a huge amount from my husband, who was very had a lot of common sense and practical skills, which I lacked. So I sort of, if I have any common sense now, I learned it from my husband, and he agreed to my sort of stipulation that I didn't want children when we married. So he knew that my plan was not to have children. Um, and along the way, I think he hoped that I would change my mind, but I never did. So I I ended up with a great affection for men and women, and the and I've got a lot of respect for the patriarchy as well, because my husband looked after me extremely. He protected me throughout our life together, and left me financially secure and emotionally confident as well. So that plays a key role in what I do now, that I have the confidence to go out and talk to men and women about my concerns for the physical existential crisis that we're facing right now. So the way I what I'm hoping is that men and women will learn to work together to be realistic about the crisis that we face, and to make some very tough decisions about what are wise steps from this point on. So, all those three aspects of leadership that you're talking about are absolutely key, I think. And not, I'm seeing, I do see a lot of that type of leadership out there, and I saw it in my own working life. I worked in information technology, which is pretty good, and it's got a lot of women in it. And you can't actually develop software unless you have, a diverse team that understands both what the user at the end wants, and what the person who's paying for it wants out of the whole system. So I think humans are very ingenious, but at the moment we're focusing our ingenuity on things that are self-destructive. So our whole economic model is ecocidal, because it's focused on profit and technology and growing one's population. All three of those damage the environment. So we've got ourselves into a trap where everything that we teach our children, or grow up, have children, climb up the wealth hierarchy as far as you can, learn to use this technology gadgets. All three of those things that we teach our children are actually very damaging to the environment. So we have an education system and a culture that is all very damaging to the environment, so we have so much that we need to change. It's very hard to know exactly where to start. So I mean, clearly what the patriarchy has achieved in terms of technologies is amazing, but it's not helpful at this point in time. So this is where I'm hoping women will help, because I think the men really need us, because we're much more flexible in when we come to dealing with problems. They've dealt with all their problems with hierarchy. They come in, they want a strong leader. And then we see Trump persuading a lot of men. He just goes out there, tells them what they want to hear, and they love him for it. And I'm afraid with the situation where just telling ourselves what we want to hear isn't going to work. I mean, delusion is what's got us into this predicament. So we need people who have the moral courage to say, enough's enough. We've got to be realistic. Actually, having children's not such a good idea when your planet's dying. And so, what are we going to do about it? And uh, young adults, of course, I feel so sorry for, because we've put them in this predicament, and we've taught them all the wrong things as well to prepare them for it.
Yes, everything you're saying really resonates with me because I see that that problem as well. And like you, I'm also very much an analytical thinker. I think of myself as having a lot of masculine characteristics. I don't think necessarily feminism has to or should exclude men or masculinity. I think it is important for that to be included. And it's something I talk about in my book too, how to integrate masculinity into and for men and women and all people to work together, I think is really important because I think there's this idea that feminism is anti-men, and in some ways, some practices of it are, but I don't think that's helpful because I do think we have to all be in communication and all be working together to solve these problems. But yeah, everything you said really resonates with me because I see, and I'm living in that, in the United States at this time, which is really, you know, difficult and sad to see everything that's happening as far as the just the political culture. And it's not one that has any openness to actually resolving these crises or even acknowledging that these crises exist.
Different perspective on Trump. I think he's actually helping, because he's causing such extreme polarization. There are people who that have been quite content and complacent up until now, who are now beginning to wake up, and it's the masses that are the only ones that can change the direction, and they have to be sufficiently upset before that will happen. And Trump is achieving that in many ways, partly because he's destroying the economy.
Yes, he is, but then he is also creating, and maybe more so here, but then he is also creating a stronger force of people who are um, working to destroy the environment and to harm people and dehumanize people. And so there's more momentum for that as well. And that's becoming more normalized at the same time. But I do agree with you that there are people who are now, in whichever way, more aware and more engaged.
I don't think Trump himself has caused that acceleration that you're talking about, the acceleration of the hate. I think that was always there.
It was
All
always
he
there.
all he has done is to unwrap it. So
Hmm.
it's not only there, but it is very visible.
Hmm.
And I think that is helpful, because when you've got it's like any problem. When you don't talk about it or you don't admit that it exists, it is becomes a bigger problem. It builds, and that's what's happened with racism in America. It's been in you've been in denial for a long time, and there's this pretense on the surface that you are integrating and you are trying, when in fact the reality is there's a huge amount of uh, discrimination that's been going on for years. And that is becoming apparent. The other thing that's becoming apparent is the huge wealth inequality and the way that owns owns the politician and drives the direction. So a lot of economists now that are actually talking about wealth inequality, which is one of the key things that we have to dismantle if we are going to have a less consumption. Because the top 5 billionaires, I think they use as much natural resources as the bottom 50% of the entire global population, which is totally unacceptable when we're all headed for extinction at the moment.
Mhm.
So, I mean, if the human species is to survive, the wealth hierarchy is not helping long-term survival at all. So it has to be dismantled somehow.
Mhm.
But just the huge subservience to wealth. Most people don't question it. We've always had it, and there's no doubt that there will probably always be a certain amount of hierarchy that goes on because some people are more valuable than others. But that's not the way the wealth hierarchy goes. We're paying people who are um, more selfish. That's how people get to the top of the wealth hierarchy at the moment, and they are not the most valuable people. So I think that's what people are beginning to be aware, that the ones that with the most wealth are the most destructive and dangerous to us, to us as a species. So I think that is what we're learning at the moment from Trump and what he's revealing about us, really, humans in general. So he's doing us a favor, really, because it's been going on for an awful long time.
Yeah, let's hope so. I mean, I do think being in the United States that um, the practices of discrimination that he's revealing are ones that if you asked many people, they would not say that it's not happening. I do think there's a lot of awareness about it, but maybe not generally. Um, but what's happening now and what I'm seeing in my community is a lot of terrorization that people are being harmed in ways that was not happening before. And that's what scares me.
There's no doubt that it's terrifying. Um, and I'm I'm very glad I don't live in the USA. Um, what what is very scary for me is that a lot of people in the UK cannot see. They think they're still treating Trump and the Trump phenomena as acceptable. We've still got to do, our um, prime minister is talking to Trump as though he's an ordinary person that you can negotiate with, which is not the case. Um, so the realization from or what this reveals is that the UK is quite a long way down the same direction as the USA. And so what I'm trying to inspire is an understanding that, and I'm not alone. There's an enormous lot of people outside mainstream media who are working to try and wake up the UK to the fact that we're likely to end up in the same direction as the USA is going. We've got Nigel Farage, who's being bankrolled by um, the USA anyway, um, who could take us down the authoritarian direction. So my hope is that the UK might actually um, stand up to the USA, which would help the USA. Because if people were rejecting Trump, then it would be helpful for people like yourself in America who are looking despairingly about what's happening. So um, there's a lot. there's a load of awareness out there, but obviously not in the mainstream media.
Right.
So this is where my work comes in because I'm sharing links to YouTubers who are really significant in the challenging the wealth inequality. We've got lots of economists, well qualified ones, who are speaking out now. So it's a start. But
Mhm.
I live in Oxford in England, and Oxford University is an example of a very entrenched mindset, still teaching their students the same mistakes that we've made in the past. And you've got it in the USA as well with a lot of your institutions. So I see it as an exciting time, but that's
It
because
is.
I've got nothing to lose though. I mean, I don't have any children involved, and
Mhm.
I'm grateful for that lack of. I don't have that emotional connection. I mean, I feel as though every child in the world is my child, so
Mhm.
my work is for every child.
Yeah.
But it's not as powerful as being a mother to a particular child.
Mhm. Yeah, I also like I'm similar, like I also don't have any children, so I understand that feeling of just wanting to do what's helpful for all children for the future. Um yeah.
Interesting that you don't have children. Was that a choice? Was that your choice?
It was like I never, so I went back and forth a lot with how I felt about it. There were times that I felt very strongly, even when I was a child, when I was, 6 years old was the first time I remember thinking strongly, I do not want to have, actually, I heard about someone who wasn't able to have children, and I thought at 6 years old, I hope that happens to me.
So,
And I don't know if it did or not, but and then there were times that I thought like, maybe I'd like to have a child. So I kind of went back and forth, but I never felt strongly enough about it that it was something that I wanted to do. That I did.
fascinating.
Yeah.
That is really fascinating. Um, yes, with me it was quite it was different. I just felt I would have been an incompetent mother anyway because I'm so not very practical. And I do admire people who have children. I mean, it's incredibly hard work.
Yeah.
Um, to me, it looks like incredibly. So I do admire them, and I have a lot of friends who I think have done a wonderful job as parents. But I think where we are now in the state of the planet, it is a little bit irresponsible to know how if you know how bad things are to still then it's just not fair to allow a young adult to go ahead and have children without at least warning them of the fact that their child is caught up in an extinction event.
Yes. Yes, I agree. And then contributing to that as well. Um, I so in the United States, I was looking at I'm doing a project about housing and looking at migration patterns of different people who are protected by federal and state laws from discrimination. So I'm looking at throughout Pennsylvania where I live to see where people are moving and looking in rural communities and seeing like how can we support people who are moving to these areas where they're not used to seeing people who look like them. But anyway, I was looking at the data for families with children, and throughout the state, I noticed in most areas there's been a decline in families with children over the past 5 years, and I thought that was really interesting. So I looked, more, broadly at some of that data, and I did see this decline in I think percent of families with children, maybe not number, which I thought was really interesting because at the same time, particularly in the past couple of years, there's been a real push for promoting the family in the United States and for having children. And I think that, maybe that's why, because of that data trend of the decline in the number of people who are having children or, getting married, maybe people are staying single longer. So it's really an interesting dynamic that, I think sometimes I think I see or think about when I was younger, and then I know people are having children at that age, and I think, wow, I was so didn't know anything about the world. I thought I knew, but didn't. And I don't know. And I feel like, you know, not everyone should have kids. And if they don't want to, that's okay. And it shouldn't be something that's rewarded in the way or encouraged, um, because people should be able to make their own choice about that.
The essence of it. I mean, I'm not suggesting any. What I'm suggesting is a voluntary global birth strike, that
Yeah.
everybody needs access to contraception if they want it, and there
Yeah.
are lots of people in the world who culturally and physically, either they don't have access to choose not to have children, or their culture does not allow them that.
Mhm.
Because a lot of our um, cultural norms are very insistent. I was listening to a BBC program the other day, The Moral Maze, and the argument there was that it's a moral duty to have um, children. And I was really surprised coming out of the BBC that they took this line. I mean, they weren't discussing it, they had some other voices on, but I was very surprised that they gave so much airtime to this stance. Um,
Mhm.
but like like you, I'm learning all the time. Like, I mean, certainly in the last, I've only been an author and an activist since 2020. So I've had to learn about all different aspects of life. And so your input on leadership is really, really helpful. Um, if it's okay with you, I'd like to this recording up on my YouTube channel, and I'll share it on LinkedIn if that sounds okay.
Sure, that's fine. That's
That's
fine.
brilliant.
And I really appreciate the work you're doing. I've, reviewed your website and your YouTube channel, and I think you have so much wisdom to share that can really help people better understand the challenges that are happening in the world right now. So I thank you for the work you're doing. I really appreciate it.
Thanks also, Jessica, and it's been lovely talking to you. Was
Has
there anything
been.
else that you wanted to cover?
I don't think so. I've loved chatting with you, and I know that you are part of the Gender Equity Network for RSA, so I hope I will see you as part of that.
Yes, I'm participating that much. I'm a member of most of the networks.
Me
I
too.
am fine. I'm more involved with the business and is it business and economy, and Andy Agathangelo from the finance network. I know the leaders on both those, and because I'm coming in from about shrinking um, degrowth economy, basically, um, I'm working more with those networks. But
Yeah,
clearly, the relationship um, between the genders is very significant, I feel, because I feel women are not. I certainly during my marriage, I deferred control to my husband. He looked after all the finances, and I was quite happy to do that. It was great. Um, and I think that happens a lot in terms of politics as well. A lot of women do. We do trust the men. I certainly, I personally think they're the ones with the greater ingenuity and ability to turn things around. All I'm seeing is that they're headed in the wrong direction, and they've got to lose their dependence on on the hierarchy. They've got to deconstruct the hierarchy and implement it in a more anarchic fashion, really, and allow multiple leaders to work to their full extent. I think they've missed out because a lot of really good male leaders are just overwhelmed by characters like Trump, who they. I'm seeing them in social media doing a wonderful job, but because we have this powerful, this overwhelming power hierarchy that controls the media, they don't get the exposure that they deserve.
Yeah.
We can help them get the exposure that they need, and you're doing a fantastic job. I've learned a heck of a lot just from talking to you.
Oh, thank you. I've learned so much too, and I hope we can continue to interact in some way.
It'd be lovely if you can think of something that's going on that you think I might be able to contribute to, and vice versa. I'll let you know.